heavily in China, attracted by its low labor and production costs, as well as the considerable and growing size of its domestic consumer markets. That changed in the last decade when the US-China tension peaked, and MNCs have started to adopt the China Plus One policy as their alternative strategy. Now, this session will discuss how diminishing cost advantage, geopolitical distrust, as well as strict regulations and policies are among the driving factors of the adoption of this strategy, making ASEAN a prime economic bloc to attract investments from MNCs. The time is now, especially in conjunction with the China Plus One policy. Malaysia, let's put our best foot forward and let's try to attract that FDI over onto our region. I think I will be checking with the events management. Is the link up? Link is ready. Without further ado then, I will introduce our moderator for this session. This man has more than 25 years of experience in strategic communications, investor strategy and promotion, crisis and issue response. He has led investor promotion engagements for the private and public sectors at the World Economic Forum at Davos for the past 5 years, and he's led various IPOs in Malaysia and Indonesia. The crowning achievement, including the world's second largest IPO and the biggest in Asia in 2012. This man was appointed as the Chief Marketing Officer of the Malaysia Digital Economic Corporation, MDEC, in October 2019 and assumed the Digital Investment Portfolio as Senior VP and Chief Digital Investment Officer of MDEC, December 2020. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Raymond Siva, Digital Investment, MDEC. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, let's put up the Slido QR code right here on screen. Throughout this session, you are encouraged to ask questions, and we shall be asking those questions via this platform, the Slido platform. Do scan that QR code. The room code is #MDW2022_1. So we'll give you a bit of time to access the Slido platform. And in just a few moments, we shall be going live with Mr. Winston Wenyan, high-tech investor, digital economy author, NYU Adjunct professor, all the way from Toronto, Canada. Raymond, it's over to you.
Well, good morning and welcome everybody to the second day of the Malaysia Digital Week 2022. Fabulous sessions yesterday. I have to say that just the quality of the content that we had was amazing. We begin with the two ex-ministers that were with us from the UK, as well as Indonesia, Pak Tom Lembong from Indonesia, as well as Ed Vezi from the UK. The insights that they shared and the subsequent conversations that we had really, I think, hammered home the point that ASEAN is where the digital economy is really growing rapidly, and that's where the opportunities are. What was also very interesting to me was when Pak Tom said Indonesia is kind of plateauing, and perhaps, you know, in terms of the unicorns and interest in the digital companies, they may be tapering off. And you know, Singapore is kind of like flat, right? They've reached their point of, I think, of saturation. And so the next really countries that would see growth would be Malaysia, right? And potentially Thailand, Vietnam. So that really puts us in a very good spot, you know, coming out of the pandemic, you know, China opening up its borders again. I think travel restrictions will be lifted very soon, from what I understand. And that really means there would be interest coming into ASEAN. And I think this topic here today would be then very relevant, right? And I look forward to speaking to our esteemed guests. Winston, good morning. Welcome to the Malaysia Digital Week. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you very much, Raymond. I'm really glad to be here. And hopefully our next conversation will, you know, I can be in Malaysia in person.
That really is the plan. We hope to get you here. You know,
Yes.
just looking at your videos and the interviews you've done over the last couple of years, we really wanted you in person, right? So this is the closest we can get for now, but next year I'm sure that we'll see each other face to face. No, I'm just going to jump straight into it, right? China's digital economy, $7 trillion USD. It has grown rapidly even through the pandemic, even through the lockdowns. What are some of the factors that are driving that digital economy? Perhaps you can share your thoughts about maybe 3 key factors that have driven the Chinese digital economy.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So let's. Yeah. This will be a great opening for the conversation. You know, I think China's digital transformation has taken place really dramatically last decade, and we can attribute 3 important government initiatives relating to that. The first is about putting the digital transformation as a national priority, right? Every country talks about AI policy or talks about fourth industrial revolution, right? But there's probably no other country than China put it as a national policy. You know, started earlier years about Internet Plus to recent Digital China, very, very expressive, right? And number 2 is about investing into digital infrastructure. Right. You know, China really put a lot of effort to develop the basic internet connectivity across the whole country. Right now, China has 1 billion internet users. And on top of that, new generation of digital infrastructure, such as cloud data centers, you know, are coming to the picture. Now, what's really interesting is during the COVID, right, this time for economic stimulation, instead of putting money into traditional infrastructures like toll roads or high-speed trains, right, the government put stimulus package into quote-unquote new infrastructure, which essentially relates to 5G networks, cloud computing, and the data centers. And finally, I think what China has done very effectively was to create an ecosystem. And this includes multiple policies as a combined forces. You know, for example, setting up industry parks across the country to attract entrepreneurs to set up companies, lower taxes to promote innovation, and lots of government-initiated funding to get into startups very early, so that the entrepreneurs, right, can start their business with funding from government. So I would say policy, infrastructure, and ecosystem are the 3 important factors.
And it's obviously, you know, resulted in the growth that we have seen. But that said, over the last 2 years, we've also seen major disruptions, right, in the global supply chains. And especially what's happening right now in Europe, and if you see in other places, even the lockdown in China, has really disrupted how investment flows are moving, even for Chinese companies, and how China is looking at investments outside of China, right?
Sure.
How do you think China is going to react to that, number 1? And number 2, the companies who have invested in the digital economy in China, do you think they're looking at a China +1 strategy?
Yes. The quick answer is yes, for both. I think here, you know, we can see China and ASEAN connectivity from both sides. You know, I call them the hard connectivity side, and also the soft connectivity side. Okay, the hard part is about the digital Silk Road, right, which is the digital prong of the Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to increase the trade and investment links in the Eurasia region, right, between China and Africa, ASEAN, and Europe. So as we look into the digital Silk Road, this will lead to cross-border digital infrastructure connectivities, right, between China and ASEAN. For example, cloud networks, or optical cables, right, or satellite communications. So we'll see that kind of digital infrastructure collaboration. And the softer side is the corporate platform connectivities. So this is mostly about Chinese tech companies, internet companies expanding overseas. Now, as you mentioned about all the changing dynamics, geopolitical tensions, etc., right? Actually, all these factors make ASEAN market the most natural market for Chinese companies expansion, right? They're nearby, same time zone, similar culture, and most importantly, similar market characteristics. You know, the density of population, you know, the leapfrog into mobile payment, and also the drive to move into a high income society. All these are very similar. So I would say we are going to see a lot more focused expansion and collaboration between China and ASEAN countries like Malaysia.
So on that point, and I refer to one of the interviews that you've done recently about investing in digital infrastructure, right? So a lot of the countries, like you rightly said early on when we had a chat, it's no more just the toll roads or the ports. They're looking at digital infrastructure, right? And the realization now is that those infrastructure are national assets. Right? It becomes very important that the sovereignty over those digital assets are held by the country, right? Data centers, fiber connectivity, and the rest.
Exactly.
Now, so if you're thinking about Chinese companies coming out, for example, and also looking to invest in digital infrastructure throughout the region, because that's where I think the most opportunity is right now in ASEAN.
Right.
How will that play out, do you think, with the countries in ASEAN? Will there be an openness towards, you know, surrendering or working with Chinese companies for digital assets?
Great question. You know, since data is viewed as the new oil for the new economy, right? So there definitely will be a lot more talk about data ownership, data sovereignty, and especially in the context of cross-border data flow, right? So this will definitely come up. And interestingly, I think the example of Apple in China will be a very interesting reference. If you think about it, right? Apple is one of the few companies, actually maybe the only US company that has a large user base in China, outside of its US headquarters, right? Now, how do Apple handle the data in China? Since, you know, hundreds of millions of Chinese people use Apple phone, right? That's a big data issue. So what happened is Apple sets up China operations separately, and then relating to the Chinese user data, they're managed locally in China. In fact, they teamed up with local partner to build up a dedicated data center to store that data. And the Chinese partner is taking the lead in terms of managing that data. Yeah. So I think, you know, this Apple situation in China may become a very interesting reference for Chinese companies' expansion into ASEAN countries.
So with this, what we just discussed just now, there are two things that I would also like to get your thoughts on, right? The travel restrictions look like it's going to be lifted quite soon. So we anticipate a lot of the companies, a lot of the investment flows to come out quite soon. That also means that ASEAN companies, such as Malaysia as well, are able to get into China, right? And explore of course, the latent opportunities in there, right? Now, what are the key areas do you think that investors will be looking for in ASEAN, right? The MNCs who are in China or the MNCs who are coming into ASEAN. What do you think, where do you think the latent opportunities are first? And number two, where can companies in ASEAN look into China and say, those are the opportunities that we can get into as well?
Oh, terrific question. I think, you know, both directions we'll see a lot of activities. You know, in terms of Chinese companies into ASEAN, right? I think it will start with the popular apps and the digital infrastructure type of things. So, for example, mobile payment apps, right? Since e-commerce platforms like Alibaba or Tencent, right? They're doing a lot of e-commerce in this region. Naturally, their mobile payment apps will expand into this region, try to pick up more users. In fact, China, the market is very saturated. If they can make a successful expansion into Malaysia or Indonesia, right, this will become very important growth for them. And similarly for digital infrastructure, right? Alibaba Cloud, right? Today, Alibaba's most important growth sector is its cloud business. It's no longer the e-commerce business, right? So when they come to countries like Malaysia, it will become very, very relevant because on one hand, Malaysia has a lot of small and medium-sized companies, and for them, the flexibility of cloud service, low cost, right, can be very relevant to them, and at the same time, for entrepreneurs, right, when they start a business, to have access to an alternative cloud service, as compared to AWS or Amazon, can be very useful. Now, so that's the China into Malaysia, right? And from Malaysia into China, I think it's mostly about scaling. It's most about scaling. In Malaysia, you have a lot of small, medium enterprises. Lots of startup ideas, right? But your growth may be limited if you only look into the Malaysian market itself. By connecting with Chinese large internet platforms like Alibaba, right? For example, retail, right? Then a new startup can commercialize its idea and scale its business much more quickly than before.
And that provides a great segue into my next question in terms of unicorns, right? So if we talk about companies, right, going both ways, 2013, I believe there was about 30 odd unicorns.
That's right, because they're meant to be rare.
They're meant to be rare. Yes, you're right. So in 7 or 8 years, I think we're up to about 400 unicorns globally, right? At the end of 2019,
more than
2020.
400. Yes.
More than 400.
Yes.
So there's a tenfold increase in these rare unicorns, right? So they're quite easily available these days, if you think of it that way. And there seem to be 3 things about these unicorns, right? Firstly, they're providing an online service, like you said, right? Secondly, they're using social media to provide that online, push their online service. And
Precisely.
the third one is partnerships, right? With the big multinationals to be able to scale, right?
That's right.
But to that point, now we see the unicorns not as rare as before. And the valuation game is getting a little tired, right?
Yes.
So yesterday at the sessions that we had, now we're talking about value creation, right?
Right.
What are your views on that? It's following the book that you wrote as well, right? Hunt for the Unicorns. What is your view on that?
No, you're absolutely right, right? The tenfold growth of the number of unicorns come from a very special period of time, the last 10 years. Several important factors, right? You mentioned number one, the social network. So you can build up a company based on the growth of users. It's kind of a new way of evaluating a company, right? Say how my growth of users. That's number one. Number two is about global capital, right? For the first time, we saw a 100 billion VC fund, like the Vision Fund, right, which creates a lot of unicorns because its check is by definition is 1,000 times than a typical VC fund, because a typical VC fund size is about 100 million, right? And as a third part, was because of China. Actually, China become a new market. Lots of ideas, lots of startups. So the capital and the social network, all these models, right? They can come to the China market and just sort of manufacture unicorns, right? Now, if we think about these factors in today's market, we don't have the same amount of capital growth. And as a social network, is sort of matured, right? People are mostly have their attention in a few main platforms. That means young startups need to work harder to attract the attention of the user traffic. But you still have the third factor. The third factor is a unique market, right? So if the Malaysian market can come up as like the new China market, I think you still have a good chance to come up with new unicorns.
So do you think then the investors that are in China right now, they're maintaining their investments? For example, Tesla is not going to go anywhere, right? They're still maintaining their investments in China. Are they then looking at ASEAN in your mind? Do you see that trade flows, investment flows already moving out? Is there a shift at the moment?
No, this is interesting. I would say yes and no, because China has unique strengths that Malaysia cannot easily replace right now. Look at the Tesla. You use this example, right? So number one is manufacturing ecosystem, right? Even though we talk about digital transformation, but that does not mean the made in China story is not relevant, right? In fact, for small hardware, it is very relevant. So the ecosystem of components, sourcing, manufacturing, distributing in China, right, is very mature after 3 decades. For new market, it's very hard to replace that ecosystem. Number two is about the customer market, right? The customer market, part of the reason Tesla is in China is because the end customer, a lot of the end customers are in China, right? So you manufacture where your customers are, right? So for these two factors cannot be easily replaced, right, by another market.
But I would argue
they do not have the manufacturing ecosystem and they do not have the customers.
But I would argue if you look at ASEAN in general, we've got 660 million, right? So Malaysia in the context of ASEAN,
right.
We seem to have some strengths as a bloc, if you can call it a bloc, right?
Of course.
So would investors then look and say that, listen, ASEAN provides me also a great opportunity, 660 million, digitally savvy, young population, manufacturing hubs in Vietnam, perhaps in Indonesia, and then you've got Malaysia in the mix.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a very attractive proposition to investors as well right now?
Oh, totally. I think the word you used, the block, is very similar to the word I used the ecosystem, right? Like if the block can come up with a manufacturing ecosystem that can supply a broad variety of components, right, and a broad variety of services for sectors like electric car. Certainly, this can be very competitive, right? And also about the consumer market, right? The China market is very easy. The China market is very easy for for a foreign brand because it is a big market. Online it's like 1 billion users, right? And they are of the same culture, same language, and they're integrated by the same mobile payment ecosystem, right? So for a foreign brand to deal with that market, actually it's quite easy. By contrast, Europe is much more difficult. So hopefully, ASEAN can be a bloc, so it can be in the middle, right? Similar culture, similar language, and integrated by the mobile payment.
Right. We have the Slido on, so if you have any questions at all, please do send it to me so we can, address it to Winston. But just moving on very quickly, while we're waiting for any questions to come in, the platform economy, right? The platform economy seems to also be past its peak. My recent visit to London at London Tech Week, we're talking about deep tech and AI driving a lot of the developments that's going to come up. In fact, already driving a lot of the developments that are going to come up.
Yes.
What do you think are some of the trends that you see coming up over the next 1 year as the world completely opens up, travel is lifted, innovation is, I think, bubbling up again? What's your take on deep tech and where are the trends going?
Oh, very interesting question. First, I think the trend into innovative technologies is real. Last decade, it was mostly about innovative models, right? If you think about internet platforms, yes, they use technology, mostly internet, right? But in the example of taxi hailing, it is mostly using internet to reorganize the system, right? It's not a kind of real technology change. So last decade, the internet platforms, right? They are mostly about innovative models. Now, this decade is about innovative technologies, right? In China, people use the term IABCD. I is Internet of Things, A is AI, artificial intelligence, B is blockchain, C is cloud, D is like data analytics. And what's sort of in the middle of everything is about data. AI is about data, blockchain is about data, cloud is about data, right? So I think one big trend is about all the focus on data. What's new data storage solution, like for example, decentralized data storage solution, and also the more efficient usage of data to create value, like AI, automation, etc. Right? So data-related technologies will be one big trend. Now, another important trend, interestingly, is to go back to offline. Because people increasingly find that online experience is not enough, right? So I'll give you two examples. One is in retail. Because of COVID, people want to have more healthy food, right, and more natural foods. And now, if they want to if the Chinese consumer purchases a Malaysia fruit from Alibaba, right, this is not standard products. So actually, Alibaba has digital physical stores. They're called fresh hippo stores. So people can walk in there, check out these unique products, and use the phone to check on their, scan the code to get their information about their transportation journey, provided by blockchain, supported by blockchain, right? So they need this offline experience. And another example is gaming. About gaming. Virtual gaming growth actually slowed in 2022 because after 2021 big growth, people find post-COVID, we want to see each other, right? So we see more and more gaming played by groups in offline locations like a stadium, right? So I think going forward, you will see both trends happening at the same time. A lot more focus on data, and at the same time, people spend more time thinking about offline and how to connect offline with online experiences.
So that's very interesting because, China obviously has its own data privacy laws. I'm not entirely sure how easy it is to get open data, there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so as we think about that as well, again, I'm looking from an investment flow standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Will that, when you say opening up and data is going to be the new engine of growth and you need that, would that also affect investments into China? And what are the opportunities in there, especially when data is not freely available in any geography?
Great point. The way to look at it is to separate the internet platforms from the traditional industries. On one hand, as you said, right, China has set up a new data regulation framework, essentially limiting big tech companies' collection of data. So in terms of the data, value creation through data on big internet platforms, you're right. They will be limited. So for example, Ant Financial, right, the fintech arm of Alibaba, they used to use big data of consumers to come up with competitive pricing for small loans, etc. Right? But with new laws limiting their power to collect and use consumer data, that kind of value creation will be limited, right? But at the same time, right, China is promoting the digital transformation of traditional industries, right? Healthcare, financial services, even manufacturing, right? So the government is promoting their adoption of data technologies, started by moving IT operation to the cloud, and then secondly, digitalize their operation, and then finally, when they collect these data, they use artificial intelligence to improve their operation, right? So I would say more from investment flow perspective, the new opportunities will come from the digital transformation of the traditional industries.
I think that's a very, very good point. And related to that is climate tech, right?
Yes.
How do you see that developing? Because ESG now is the buzzword, but I don't think
Yes.
it'll be just a buzzword. I think it'll be how companies operate and how countries would look at investments as well, right? What do you think about climate tech, and where do you see that moving?
Oh, totally. Again, the keyword is data, surprisingly. The keyword is about data. Here, we can look through the lens of an investor, right? So if you look at the top of the capital flow, which are the asset owners, like the sovereign funds. I used to work at CIC, and in Malaysia you have Khazanah, right? For the asset owners, right? They are at the top of the capital flow. From asset owners, you go to asset managers, you get into the PE funds, VC funds, you get into companies, etc. Right? So for the asset owners, it is very important to understand how to implement ESG investment philosophy. Right? Now, in order to analyze that, you need good data. You need good data. That means you need to understand the real impact of your ESG investments, right? And then come to the individual portfolio company level, you need to have ongoing data on their operation, right? Whether it's about carbon emission or whether about job creation, from the social perspective or from the governance perspective, you need to quantify it. You need to quantify it, right? And recently, the US SEC came up with a new rule, right? Asking listed companies who claim to be a ESG player, right, to report their impact in more quantifiable disclosure, right? I think overall, it's about data. And this is about going forward, we will see a lot more investments in this space to come up with data solutions for the ESG monitoring and supervising purposes.
How does blockchain play into this, right? So you talk about data, and I agree with you. I'm aligned with you, right? But how does blockchain technology play into this, right? And also, from my understanding as well, that China has got its own blockchain protocol too, which is very separate from consensus or all the rest of the other protocols, right?
Exactly.
How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, no, the China side is not a public blockchain, right? So they're more like a consortium blockchain. So it is not based on power of work. So it does not, it does not have the electricity issue, from a POW, right? So to your question, what's the relevance of blockchain here? It's interesting. Two sides. One side, because a lot of the blockchain applications involve power of work, POW mechanism for validation, which consumes a lot of energy, right? So there's a little bit of kind of renewable energy versus traditional energy, a cheaper traditional energy type of debate, right? But the flip side is blockchain is a very useful database tool, right? So in the context of tracking ESG impact, tracking the real data of ESG investments, blockchain can be very useful as a database technology.
Right. As we're coming up to the 30 minutes, I just want to end it with people, right? So how do we see the Chinese people and for example, in Malaysia, right? Now that the travel restrictions are going to be up, right? Talent mobility is key. Everywhere that I go and I speak to and say there's a shortage of talent because of the growth of the digital economy. China has $1 billion plus, right?
Yes.
How can we get ASEAN, Malaysia, and China, the talents, across? And in what particular areas can we start with so that we understand each other? And which are the particular tech areas do you think we should be focusing on based on the trends that you just said?
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Now, I think first, retail will be there. Retail will be there because Chinese consumer market always looking for like new things, This is a concept called consumption upgrade, right? When Chinese consumers are satisfied with the standard products for daily lives, for their extra income, right? They look for unique brands, unique experiences. So I think going forward, travel plus retail shopping plus social media posting will be a very big one for Chinese average people. When the borders are lifted, they will travel, physical experience, offline experiences, right? And they will purchase, which is a combination of online, offline, because some of the purchases may be driven by the live streaming of the Malaysia merchants, right? And then after their experiences, they will record these experiences and put into their social network as unique contents. I think that part will be very immediate once the cross-border travel restarts.
Winston, thank you so much for your time. I'm just going to go to the floor right now. Are there any questions? Perhaps, nothing on my Slido. So if you do have any, sorry? Let me just check that. Apparently I have some in my WhatsApp. Okay.
Of course.
A quick look.
Yeah, it's all digital, right?
Right. Okay. Nope. Nothing here yet. So on that note, Winston, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
We really hope to have you here in Malaysia soon, next year. We hope that will happen. In the meantime, again, thank you very much for joining us at the Malaysia Digital Week. We hope that you had a good session here today, and if there are any other questions that we have, please send them across to us. I'll send it to Winston, and hopefully he'll reply via email, and we share that with you. Yeah?
Of course.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Look forward.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was a live session with Mr. Winston Ma and, of course, Raymond Siva right here asking the right questions. And you guys can ask the right questions again. We will be putting up this QR code. This is our survey platform. Let's put it up right here, right now. Do scan this code and you can leave us feedback, especially as to how we can improve for next year's Malaysia Digital Week 2023. So some takeaways from this session. I absolutely agree. Data is the new oil. And when we take a look at the China perspective, they've been going on big on digital transformation. They made it a national objective, not too far off from Malaysia, actually. They've invested in infra, 5G networks, cloud computing, data centers, and talent management, as well as policies to lower taxes and encourage innovation among the Chinese. Now, one of the barriers to collaborating with China, of course, is standards and protocols. China develops their own. Integration has proven a challenge when it comes to cross-border collaboration or scaling tech in China. And so what have we got here in ASEAN, specifically here in Malaysia? Ease of mobile payment, digital transactions. Yes, we are quite digitally savvy. We have a strong SME presence, ready to build capacity and scale. And so for players, industry players out here, definitely, if you don't have an eye on China, then you really have to review how you look at things as an entrepreneur, yeah?